Why did she always feel the most dangerous moments came in the quietest places? The terminal at Denver International Airport was loud with the chatter of travelers, the hum of luggage wheels over polished tile, and the distant voice of a gate agent announcing boarding for a flight to Chicago. But for Maya Reeves, the real noise was inside her head, the kind you couldn't drown out with airport music or casual conversation. Her fingers tightened around the worn leather strap of her Canon EOS R5 camera, the one piece of equipment she treated like a lifeline. To everyone else in the security line, she looked like any other journalist heading toward another humanitarian story. Her brown jacket hung loosely, her hair was tucked beneath a simple cap, and her backpack bulged with gear most reporters would consider excessive. But Maya wasn't like most reporters. She'd spent the last 15 years perfecting the art of invisibility. It wasn't about hiding in shadows. It was about blending in so well that you became part of the background noise. She had worked in places that turned other reporters away at the border. Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, eastern Ukraine. She'd slept in burned-out apartment buildings, eaten with soldiers in bombed villages, and walked through streets where death didn't just lurk in the distance. It stepped out to greet you. Her colleagues at American Global News often joked that she was fearless. "Don't you ever get scared out there?" Michael Rodriguez had asked her just last week, leaning over her desk after she'd returned from covering cartel violence along the Texas-Mexico border. She had given him the same calm, unblinking look she always did. Fear comes from inexperience. Michael laughed, assuming it was false modesty. He had no idea. He didn't know that the woman sitting across from him had more combat experience than most active-duty Rangers, that before she ever picked up a camera, she'd picked up something far heavier and used it. That morning's assignment was supposed to be routine. Phoenix, Arizona, refugee resettlement operations. Her editor, David Thompson, had briefed her in his usual casual tone. Standard humanitarian coverage. He'd said, "Get some human interest. Pieces, families adapting to life in Arizona, success stories, nothing complicated." Nothing complicated. She had nodded, packed her gear, and told herself she would treat it like any other domestic assignment. A flight to Phoenix, a couple of interviews, photographs, maybe a short written piece. She didn't know this trip would tear open the part of her life she'd buried so deep. She almost believed it was gone. The TSA line moved forward. Maya stepped up to the conveyor belt and began unpacking her equipment for screening. That was when Agent Robert Bobby Williams noticed her. Bobby wasn't just any TSA agent. He was a former Marine sergeant who had done 3 tours in Iraq. He'd learned to notice details others missed, the small tells that separated the trained from the untrained. Maya's bag wasn't organized like a normal photographer's. Every lens was arranged for maximum efficiency. Batteries were positioned for rapid changeout. Memory cards were stored in tactical pouches. It was neat, but not just neat. It was combat neat. "Journalist?" he asked casually as she slid the bag toward the scanner. "Yes, American Global News." She replied without hesitation. Her voice level, controlled. Bobby nodded. But something tugged at the edges of his memory. Her posture, the way her eyes kept moving, cataloging exits, scanning the crowd without ever appearing to focus on one thing. It reminded him of the stories, the ones every Marine in Iraq had heard. Even if they'd never seen proof, the Phantom, a sniper who could make impossible shots in impossible conditions. A ghost who had saved more lives than anyone could count, then vanished without a trace. Bobby told himself it was impossible. The Phantom was a legend, a rumor soldiers told each other in the dark. And then it happened. Maya picked up her camera. For one last check, the strap slipped. The cannon began to fall. She didn't think. She reacted. In less than a second, she bent her knees into a perfect combat crouch. Her torso rotated with surgical precision. Her hands shot forward in the Exact positioning she would have used to steady the barrel of a high-powered rifle. She caught the camera before it hit the ground, but the crack of the lens shattering echoed like a gunshot in her ears. It wasn't just a movement. It was muscle memory. It was Phantom's movement. Bobby's breath caught. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers, spilling across the counter. "That's impossible," he whispered. Maya straightened, cradling the damaged camera in her hands. The body was cracked. The lens was ruined. Her tool of the last 2 years was dead. But the broken camera wasn't her biggest problem. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her eyes locking on his, reading him like she used to read enemy combatants through a scope. Bobby swallowed hard. "Are you Phantom?" The name hit her like incoming fire. No one had spoken it to her face in 15 years. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said flatly. Her tone sharpened to the cold edge she used in interrogation rooms long ago. "I'm former military," Bobby said quickly. "I served in Iraq. I've seen that movement before. That's not something a journalist learns in college." Her pulse quickened. The security cameras above were recording. The old rules came back without her wanting them. Rules she had promised herself she'd never use again. "Recognition is death to a ghost. My name is Maya Reeves. I'm a correspondent. Nothing more, nothing less." Bobby forced a smile, but his eyes gave him away. "Of course, my mistake. Have a safe flight." But she could feel him watching her as she walked toward her gate. She could sense him reaching for his phone. Within minutes, Bobby was on a secure call to Marcus Patterson, the airport security director and a 25-year FBI veteran. "Marcus, we have a code black," Bobby said. "A woman named Maya Reeves. I think she's Phantom." The ceramic coffee mug in Marcus's hand shattered against his floor. "What the hell did you just say?" "I saw her move, Marcus. It's her." Patterson pulled up the security footage and watched the moment frame by frame. The crouch, the rotation, the hands, his stomach tightened. Son of a... That's really her. 30 seconds later, he was on the secure Pentagon line. "General Harrison, we found her," Marcus said. The voice on the other end went quiet. "Phantom's been dark for 15 years, Harrison said finally. "She might as well be dead." "She's alive," Marcus said, "at my airport, flying to Phoenix under the name Maya Reeves." Harrison's heart sank. Phantom had been his greatest asset and his greatest loss. He had given her missions no one else could have survived. He had trusted her with lives, and she had saved them. Again and again, then, after Fallujah, she had vanished, and now she was here. "Stop her before she boards," Harrison ordered. Maya was almost at gate A8 when she felt it, the subtle shift in the air that only combat veterans noticed. Security had multiplied. Eyes were on her, compromised. She adjusted her bag and turned toward the nearest exit, and stopped. "Miss Reeves." The man was close, his uniform crisp, silver stars glinting under the terminal lights. She froze. "I'm General Harrison," he said quietly. "We need to talk." Her pulse pounded, but her face stayed neutral. "I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else, General." "Hannum," Harrison said, his voice low. "After 15 years, don't you recognize your old CO?" Her grip on the broken camera tightened, and just like that, the past she had buried was standing in front of her. How do you stand face to face with the man who built you, after spending 15 years trying to dismantle yourself? Maya didn't move. The terminal seemed to slow around her, the rush of passengers blurring into background shapes, the PA announcements melting into meaningless static. "I don't know who you're talking about," she said, keeping her tone even, her breathing steady. Harrison smiled faintly, not a warm smile. The kind a chess player gives when they see the next 5 moves before their opponent. "Maya Reeves, 38, former Staff Sergeant, United States Army Special Operations. Codename, Phantom, Iraq, 2007 to 2009. 52 confirmed tactical. Elimination, 0 civilian casualties. Estimated 300 Allied lives saved. Disappeared without a trace after Fallujah. Her jaw tightened. That person's dead. No, Harrison said, stepping just close enough for her to smell the faint trace of aftershave and jet fuel. That day, you chose to live, and now you're here. She turned her head slightly, scanning the terminal, a habit she couldn't break even after years away. The family shuffling toward security, the business travelers dragging sleek suitcases. Not one of them had the faintest clue they were standing within arm's reach of a woman whose name was whispered in war zones like a myth. What do you want from me? To talk about? There's a situation, and we need your help. Maya gave a dry, humorless laugh. I'm not a soldier anymore. That life is over. Maybe for you, Harrison said quietly, but the skills you have, there. Not gone? They're waiting? And right now, there's someone who needs them. Her eyes narrowed. No kills, she said immediately. Before he'd even explained, he nodded once, as if he'd anticipated that. Protection only. Her grip on the broken camera tightened again. She could still feel the reflex that had betrayed her earlier, the movement that had drawn Bobby's. Suspicion. 15 years of staying out of sight undone in a single second. Harrison gestured toward a quieter area of the terminal. She didn't follow him immediately. She weighed the exits, the angles, the distance between here and the nearest checkpoint. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But curiosity, and something heavier, kept her rooted. She followed him into the airport's VIP security lounge. The door sealed with a mechanical click. The hum of the terminal vanished. He placed a thick, sealed folder on the table between them. She recognized the classification markings instantly and felt her stomach turn. Maya, there's a doctor in Phoenix, Harrison began. Lisa Martinez, emergency medicine, she's been running a clinic inside the Syrian refugee resettlement center. She saved hundreds of lives, and now she's been marked for assassination by a domestic terror group. Maya flipped the folder open. A photograph stared back at her. A young woman, in her early 30s, smiling into the camera, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes bright with that stubborn optimism only certain people carry into dangerous places. They call themselves the Desert Patriots, Harrison continued. White supremacist cell, they believe she's a traitor for treating Muslim refugees. Intel says they're planning to strike during the weekly clinic. Maximum civilian presence. She studied the photo longer than she meant to. Dr. Martinez looked like the kind of person who still believed the world could be fixed if you tried hard enough. Maya remembered when she'd been that way, before Fallujah. Why me? She asked. Because you're already scheduled to fly there, Harrison said. As Maya Reeves, journalist, you're the only one we trust to keep her alive without blowing your cover, or hers. She closed the folder slowly. This is voluntary? Completely. You can walk out right now and never hear from me again. Or you can take this one mission, protect her, and maybe find some peace. The word made her flinch. Peace wasn't something she believed in for years. She looked back down at the photograph. No kills, she said again. Agreed. This is the last time. After this, I go back to my life. Phantom stays buried. Harrison's eyes held hers for a long second. Understood. Ghost operation. No one will know. He reached down, pulled a small wooden box from his bag, and slid it toward her. What's this? Open it. The latch clicked. Inside, nestled in black foam, lay a custom-built scope. Her scope. The one she'd carried through Iraq. The one she thought had been destroyed. She picked it up slowly, the weight familiar in her hands. Her thumb traced the etched serial number. Still there. Still hers. You kept it. I was hoping you'd come back someday, Harrison said softly. Her throat tightened. You can't expect me to. It's just a scope, he interrupted. What you do with it is up to you. 2 hours later, Maya boarded her flight to Phoenix. Her new camera gear was stowed beneath her seat. Hidden among the lenses and batteries was equipment no journalist would ever carry: non-lethal deterrence, advanced comms, surveillance tech, enough to turn her into a ghost again. She leaned her head against the window as the plane lifted off. Watching Denver shrink below, she told herself she wasn't Phantom anymore. But deep down, she knew she was already building the mission in her head. Why did Phoenix feel hotter than she remembered? It wasn't just the heat radiating from the concrete as she stepped off the shuttle bus outside the refugee resettlement center. It was the weight, the kind that settles between your shoulder blades when you know eyes might already be watching you. Maya adjusted her bag on her shoulder, scanning the block without moving her head. The center looked almost ordinary. 2 converted warehouse buildings, a chain-link fence, a courtyard, where children played on swings that creaked in the dry wind. From the outside, you'd think it was just another community outreach project. But the trained part of her brain didn't see children and picnic tables. It saw sightlines, choke points, and cover positions. She could already imagine where an attack would come from, and how quickly it could be over. Inside, the air was cooler, smelling faintly of antiseptic and cooking spices. She followed the sound of voices until she found the clinic. Dr. Lisa Martinez stood over an exam table, her hand steady as she wrapped the swollen foot of an elderly Syrian man. Her voice was soft but carried a firmness that made people listen. She moved like someone used to being in a crisis, focused, precise. When the doctor finally looked up, her expression was polite but tired. "You're the journalist?" "Maya Reeves, American Global News, Doctor." Martinez nodded and gestured to a chair. "You'll have to give me a few minutes. We're short-staffed." Maya sat, taking in the room without seeming to. Only one security guard at the entrance, and he looked more like a volunteer than trained personnel. Windows unreinforced, multiple points of entry. When the patient left, "Doctor," Martinez washed her hands and turned back to her. "So, what's your angle? Human interest? The refugee experience?" "Something like that," Maya said. "But there's more." The doctor frowned slightly. "More?" "I know you're in danger," Maya said quietly. "I'm here to make sure nothing happens to you." "Doctor," Martinez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're a reporter. What exactly are you going to do if someone comes after me? Take their picture?" Maya's eyes held hers. "I've picked up a few skills along the way." The doctor's smile faded as if she realized this wasn't a joke. That night, when the center was quiet, Maya slipped into the perimeter under the cover of darkness. She moved like she had in the old days, silent, unhurried, knowing exactly where her weight shifted on each step. She mapped the grounds, noting 12 potential breach points, 2 on the north wall, 4 along the east side, where the chain-link fence sagged. 3 rooftops across the street had perfect overwatch positions. By 2:00 a.m., she had a plan, one that would keep her promise not to kill, but still make an attack almost impossible to carry out. At dawn, she watched the center wake up. Mothers shepherded children toward the school building. Men left for job training classes. The clinic began filling with patients, and still, she felt the itch at the base of her neck, the one that meant trouble wasn't far away. At 6:23 a.m., her surveillance equipment lit up. 2 pickup trucks approached from the east, moving in loose formation. 8 men, armed. She spoke into her comes, low, steady. "Base, this is Ghost. Packages inbound. Initiating protective protocols." What does it take to stop yourself from becoming who you used to be, when everything in you is screaming to go back? The 2 pickup trucks rolled closer, engines growling against the still morning air. Dust trailed behind them, curling in the sunlight. Through her optics, Maya saw the men clearly now, mismatched clothing, hard eyes, weapons slung low but ready. They weren't professionals. That was good. But they were committed, and that was dangerous. She shifted to her secondary observation post, a shadowed gap between two shipping containers on the east side. Her breathing slowed, her body settled into a position it remembered too well, her muscles aligning with the precision of old training. The part of her that was phantom wanted to reach for the scope Harrison had given her, to set up the shot, to solve the problem the way she'd done in Iraq, quickly, cleanly, permanently. But that wasn't the promise she'd made. She tapped a small device clipped to her belt. A faint buzz rippled through the fence line. A custom trip trigger she'd rigged in the dark hours before dawn. The moment the first truck crossed it, canisters the size of soda cans popped from concealed mounts along the fence, belching thick plumes of gray smoke into the air. The lid truck braked hard. The second almost slammed into it. In the confusion, she activated the sound cannon mounted on the roof of the storage shed. A piercing, low-frequency blast hit them. Not loud enough to rupture eardrums, but enough to scramble balance and focus. One man stumbled out of the truck, weapon half raised, eyes watering from the smoke. Maya moved fast, not toward him, but toward the crowd gathering in the courtyard. She waved them toward the west exit, her voice low but cutting through the chaos. Inside the school building, now, lock the doors, Doctor. Martinez was in the clinic doorway, frozen for a second before snapping into action. Ushering patients inside, the attackers regrouped. Fanning out in the smoke, Maya triggered her second layer, a trio of flashbangs she'd hidden near the eastern gate. The sharp cracks and bursts of light forced the men back, disoriented. A younger version of her would have ended it here. Precise shots, no survivors. But now she moved differently, using cover and distance to herd them without closing in. Every step calculated to keep her between them and the clinic. A burst of gunfire rang out, not at her, but into the air, a warning, an attempt to intimidate. She ignored it. Instead, she grabbed one of the last tools in her kit, a compact drone armed with high-intensity strobe lights. It rose above the smoke, its sudden brightness cutting into the attackers' vision, forcing them to shield their eyes. By the 6-minute mark, the fight had turned into retreat. The trucks peeled away, tires spitting gravel, the men shouting to each other over the fading whine of the sound cannon. Maya lowered her gear slowly, listening for the sound of return fire. None came. When she stepped back into the courtyard, Dr. Martinez was staring at her like she'd just watched a magician make an entire army vanish. How did you? Maya gave a small shrug. Just some skills I picked up along the way. It wasn't entirely a lie, but as the adrenaline drained, she felt the tremor in her hands. Not from fear, but from holding back, from walking the edge of an old life and not letting herself fall. When the danger passes, the quiet can feel heavier than the fight. The courtyard was still clouded with the remnants of smoke, the air tasting faintly of burned powder and metal. Children clung to their mothers' skirts inside the locked school building, their small faces pressed against the glass. Eyes wide, Maya stood near the gate, scanning the perimeter one last time. Her breathing was steady again, but her body still thrummed with leftover adrenaline, the kind that didn't fade. Quickly, the kind that used to carry her into the next engagement without pause. She could feel the old reflexes whispering in her ear. You should have ended it. You know they'll be back. But she'd made a promise, and she kept it. No one died. Doctor. Martinez stepped out of the clinic, wiping sweat from her forehead. There. All shaken up, but no one's hurt. I don't even know what to say. Don't say anything, Maya replied, her voice quiet. Just keep doing your work. That's why we're here. The doctor studied her for a moment. That wasn't just luck. You knew exactly what you were doing. Maya didn't answer. She started gathering her equipment, packing each piece with the same precision she'd unpacked it the night before. By late afternoon, the normal rhythm of the center had returned. The children were back outside, their laughter cautious at first, then freer as the memory of the attack faded. Volunteers handed out food from the kitchen. A group of men repaired a section of the fence. Maya sat alone on a low wall, her new camera in her lap. It was the first moment she'd had to herself since the trucks appeared. She lifted the camera and framed a shot of Dr. Martinez kneeling to tie a child's shoe. Light poured in from the side, catching the dust motes in the air. It was a perfect image. Humanity at its most quiet and beautiful. She clicked the shutter. The sound small and clean. Her commute buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated before answering. "Phantom," Harrison's voice came through, low and controlled. "I've seen the reports. That was brilliant work. I told you, I'm not Phantom anymore," she said. "The Desert Patriots are calling it a supernatural event," he continued. "They think the center's under Black Ops protection. They won't be back." "That's good," she said simply. "You saved her and the refugees. That's more than most could have done without firing a shot." Maya looked toward the clinic. Dr. Martinez was smiling at someone in line, her exhaustion hidden behind practiced warmth. "I did my job," Maya said. "No," Harrison said after a pause. "You did the job. The one only you could do." When the line went dead, she slid the cum unit back into her pocket, her thumb brushing over the worn edge of the scope still hidden in her bag. That night, lying on the thin mattress in her temporary quarters, sleep didn't come. She stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above her, the shadows flickering across her face. She thought about Fallujah, about the weight of the rifle in her hands back then, the clarity that came when the world narrowed to a single target, about the moment she decided she couldn't keep doing it. She thought about today, about the fight without the kills, the protection without the blood, and she realized something that unsettled her more than the trucks or the men with rifles. It had felt good. How do you know when a mission is really over? Maya had learned a long time ago that silence didn't always mean safety. Sometimes it was the space before the next storm. Sometimes it was the enemy pulling back just far enough to make you believe you'd won. The refugee resettlement center looked normal again, at least to anyone who hadn't seen the attack the day before. Children played soccer in the courtyard, the thud of the ball echoing off the concrete walls. Women carried baskets of laundry to the communal washing stations. The clinic's front door stayed open, letting in the smell of bread baking somewhere nearby. But under the surface, things had shifted. She could see it in the way the security volunteer now kept both hands visible, gripping the strap of a radio Harrison's team had quietly delivered overnight. She could hear it in the hushed conversations in Arabic among the older men smoking near the fence, conversations that stopped when she walked past. She could feel it in Dr. Martinez, who was working harder than ever to make it seem like life was normal. Maya had been in enough war zones to know. The survivors always tried to act normal, because the alternative was to admit they might not be safe tomorrow. She didn't say anything about it. She spent the morning doing what she'd come here to do under her cover, taking photographs, asking questions, building the skeleton of a story about resilience and rebuilding. Every image she framed seemed to carry a shadow behind it. A boy practicing his alphabet on a scrap of cardboard, shadowed by the memory of armed men at the gate. A group of women weaving baskets for sale, shadowed by the knowledge that someone might want them gone. Dr. Martinez leaning over a patient, with a reassuring smile, shadowed by the fact that she had been marked for death. Around noon, Maya took a break under the awning of the main building, sipping warm water from a plastic bottle. The phoenix heat pressed against her skin, seeping into her bones. She thought about what Harrison had said the night before, the one only you could do, that had always been the problem. The army had been good at reminding her she was the one with the steadiness, the patience, the precision, the one who could take a shot in wind and dust and chaos and still land it exactly where it needed to go. And because she could, They always asked her to. The truth was, she'd walked away not just because of Fallujah. She'd walked away because she didn't know who she was without the missions, without the next target, without being the one. Now, after yesterday, the fear came creeping back that the part of her she thought she buried was still there. And maybe it had been waiting for an excuse. She was still lost in that thought when Dr. Martinez approached. "You know," the doctor said, sitting down beside her, "I've been in some dangerous places myself. Haiti after the earthquake, Sierra Leone during the cholera outbreak, but I've never seen anything like what you did yesterday." Maya didn't answer right away. "You've seen enough to know the world's full of bad days. Yesterday was just a bad day I could help stop." "But that's the thing," Dr. Martinez said. "Most people can't stop it. You did." Maya looked at her, saw the faint dark circles under her eyes, the set of her jaw, as if she'd decided long ago she wasn't allowed to break down. It reminded her too much of the soldiers she'd patched up between firefights. "You save lives every day," Maya said quietly. "The only difference is your battlefield doesn't always look like one." The doctor's lips pressed into a thin smile. "Maybe, but I think yesterday proved yours is still out there." Before Maya could reply, her comm unit buzzed against her hip. She excused herself, moving toward the shade of a storage building before answering. "Harrison," she said, "you're still in position?" "Yes, why?" "We're picking up chatter." Harrison's voice was tight. "The Desert Patriots are humiliated, but not done. Someone high in their chain wants to send a message. Could be posturing, could be another attempt. Timeline? Unknown. Could be today, could be next week. I want you to hold position until we know more." Maya exhaled slowly. "Understood." She clicked off and slipped the comm back into her pocket. Scanning the street beyond the fence, nothing looked different. And yet, the rest of the afternoon passed slowly. She kept moving, never in one place too long, never giving anyone the chance to draw a bead on her routine. She checked the fence line, her hidden surveillance points, her entry and exit routes. By evening, the heat had begun to fade. The children played tag in the courtyard again, their laughter chasing away the quiet dread of the morning. Volunteers passed out plates of rice and vegetables. Someone had found a portable speaker, and music drifted through the air. For a moment, Maya let herself sit near the clinic steps and just watch. Dr. Martinez was telling a story to a group of kids, her hands moving animatedly. The boy with the cardboard alphabet had brought his letters to show her. The security volunteer was leaning against the fence, listening to the music. This was the reason she'd agreed to Harrison's terms, not the mission, not the skill. The people still, in the back of her mind, she knew it couldn't last. She stayed outside until the last of the daylight slipped away, the desert turning to cool shadow. Her patrol that night was slower, more deliberate. She found herself pausing to look at the rooftops again, at the streets leading in and out, not paranoid, just certain that nothing about yesterday's attack had been final. At 1:17 a.m., she caught movement on her east-facing camera feed. A single figure on a bicycle, head down, pedaling slowly past the fence. No weapon visible, no sign of a larger group. Still, she followed him through the feed until he disappeared around the corner. She didn't know if it meant anything, and that was the problem. In her world, you didn't wait to find out. By dawn, the center was waking again. She stood on the roof of the main building, the scope Harrison had given her in her hands, not mounted, just held, the weight solid and familiar. She told herself she was only looking to check the approaches, but the way her body settled, the way her breathing slowed, it was muscle memory, and that scared her more than the threat. How far can you push a promise before it breaks? The morning after her rooftop watch felt deceptively calm. The Phoenix sun was still low, softening the edges of the chain-link shadows along the courtyard wall. Inside the clinic, Dr. Martinez was already working, her voice a steady rhythm as she gave instructions to her small team. But Maya's gut told her the stillness was wrong, not just quiet. Expectant, she moved through the center as she had for the past 2 days, camera in hand, eyes always moving. Every doorway, every passing vehicle, every figure too far away to read, nothing out of place. And yet the hairs on her arms stayed raised. The desert patriots weren't done. She knew that as certainly as she knew the sound of a rifle bolt sliding into place. By mid-morning, she'd made a slow circuit of the perimeter. Her cameras showed nothing unusual. The east side breach. Points she'd identified earlier were still reinforced with extra fencing. The observation posts she'd set up gave her a clean, overlapping field of view. Still, she caught herself touching the scope in her bag, running her fingers along the worn edges of its casing. In Iraq, she'd been trained to feel the fight before. It arrived, not because of magic, not because of instinct alone, but because patterns shifted. The birds went silent. The air changed. Even here, in the middle of a refugee courtyard, she could feel it, the subtle wrongness of things holding still when they should be moving. Just before noon, the wrongness took shape. Her west-facing feed flickered. A delivery van pulled to the curb, idling longer than necessary. 2 men in plain clothes stepped out. Their movements were casual, too casual, as they walked toward the side gate carrying plastic tubs, marked with a local grocery store logo. Maya's pulse quickened. The center didn't get grocery deliveries on Thursdays. She moved toward the clinic, pretending to adjust her camera lens. From this angle, she could see the driver still in the van, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The engine stayed running. A civilian might have missed the rest. The subtle bulges under the men's loose shirts, the way their eyes scanned not the people in front of them but the rooftops, the exits. The front gate guard stepped forward. Uncertain, one of the men smiled and lifted a tub as if to show bread inside. Maya slipped her cum from her pocket. "Harrison, I have 3 possibles. Westgate, 1 driver, 2 on foot, armed. Say again, armed." Static crackled. "Phoenix PD is 5 minutes out." Harrison's voice came through. "Hold them off until then." 5 minutes, she thought. In a real firefight that was forever. The 2 men were inside the gate now, chatting easily with the guard. Closing distance toward the courtyard, where a group of children played near the swings. Maya's feet moved before she thought. She cut across the yard, using the low wall by the clinic as cover, her camera still in hand but her focus nowhere near photography. Her promise hammered in her head. No kills, no blood. But there were children 20 feet away, and the men's hands kept drifting closer to their sides. She triggered her first deterrent, a short-range sonic burst from the small speaker she'd planted in the west wall shadow. The sound was low enough to pass unnoticed by most, but it hit the men like a physical shove, making them pause mid-step, heads jerking slightly. One of them muttered something to the other, shaking it off. They kept walking. She needed to move them away from the kids. Now. "Hey," she called, her voice carrying across the courtyard. She lifted her camera, snapping an exaggerated photo of them. "Smile for the humanitarian piece. You're delivering bread, right?" They froze, eyes narrowing. The driver shifted in his seat. One of the men smirked and raised the tub again, starting toward her. "Sure, lady. Bread." She stepped back toward the school building, deliberately turning her body so that following her meant moving away from the playground. They took the bait. By the time they closed the distance, she was beside the storage shed and within arm's reach of the flashbang wired to its corner. She thumbed the trigger in her pocket. The detonation was blinding up close. The men staggered, tubs dropping to the ground, one spilling not bread, but a rolled black cloth that unfurled to reveal the unmistakable shape of an assault rifle. The driver threw the van door open, shouting something she didn't catch. Maya didn't go for the gun. She didn't need to. Her second drone was already above. its strobe hammering down in disorienting pulses. The driver cursed, shielding his eyes, and reversed hard, tires squealing. The two on foot stumbled toward the gate, disoriented. Sirens wailed in the distance. Phoenix PD swept in less than a minute later, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The men went to the ground quickly, hands on their heads. Maya stayed back, letting the officers take over. Her heart was still pounding, not from the fight, but from how close she'd come to breaking her own rule. Dr. Martinez appeared in the clinic doorway, her face pale. That was them, wasn't it? Maya gave a single nod. And you didn't? No kills, Maya said, her voice flat. The doctor didn't look convinced. You could have, you should have, if they come back. They won't. Maya interrupted. The truth was, she wasn't. Sure, but she had to believe it, because if she didn't, she knew where the next step would take her. And she wasn't ready to go back there, that night. When the center was finally quiet again, she sat alone on the roof with the scope in her hands. She didn't mount it, didn't even look through it. She just held it, feeling the weight, the balance, and the history pressed into the metal. She'd won today without firing a shot. But she wasn't sure if that meant she'd kept her promise, or if she'd only delayed the moment she would break it. When the mission ends, what's left is the part no one talks about. Not the headlines, not the after-action reports, just the quiet, the absence, the question of what you are when you're not in the fight. 3 days after the second attempt, the refugee center looked almost like it had before she arrived. Repairs were finished. The broken section of the west gate was replaced. The chain-link fence gleamed faintly under the sun where it had been newly stretched and tightened. Children ran through the courtyard again, their voices rising above the hum of the city. A volunteer passed out food to a line of families. The clinic's door was propped open, a breeze carrying the scent of fresh bread into the waiting area. Maya stood in the shade, her camera hanging against her hip. Watching, she told herself she was staying to finish her story. But she knew that wasn't why. She was making sure. She'd seen enough unfinished missions to know that walking away too early was an invitation for something to slip through the cracks. Dr. Martinez spotted her from the clinic doorway. You're leaving today, aren't you? Maya nodded. Flight. In a few hours, the doctor stepped closer, lowering her voice. I don't know who you really are, Maya, and maybe I don't want to know. But thank you. You don't have to thank me, Maya said. Yes, I do, Martinez replied. Because most people, when they see danger coming, they run the other way. You didn't. Maya almost told her the truth then, that she'd spent years running, not from danger, but from herself, from what she was capable of. Instead, she just gave a small smile. You keep them alive, Doctor. That's your job. Mine's to make sure you can keep doing it. Martinez studied her for a long moment before nodding and stepping back into the clinic. Maya turned and walked toward the side gate. The scope Harrison had given her tucked deep in her bag, wrapped in a spare shirt. She'd decided she wouldn't return it, not because she planned to use it again, but because it was a reminder of what she could do, of what she could choose not to do. She reached the curb just as a black sedan pulled up. Harrison stepped out, dressed in civilian clothes this time, though there was no mistaking the military posture that never left him. Thought, I'd give you a ride to the airport, he said. I'm fine taking a cab. I know you are, but I wanted to see you off. They got in the car, the air conditioning blowing cool against the heat still clinging to her skin. For a while, they drove in silence. You did good work here, Harrison said finally. I kept my promise, Maya replied. He glanced at her. You also kept them alive. That's more than most can say. Maya didn't answer. She watched the Phoenix streets roll past, strip malls, bus stops, the shimmer of heat rising off asphalt. I meant what I said before, Harrison continued. You're the one who can do what no one else can, if the day comes when we need you again. You won't, she cut in, her tone even but firm. He didn't push. At the airport, he pulled to the curb. She opened the door, then paused. You still have my number? Always. She gave a small nod and stepped out, the bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look back. Inside, she moved through the terminal like any other traveler, boarding pass in hand. Camera at her side. No one here knew who she was. No one here saw the missions in her eyes, or the way her attention drifted toward the sound of raised voices at a distant gate. She was invisible again. Her flight to Denver was uneventful. She spent it going through the photographs she'd taken. Martinez with the children, the families learning English, the courtyard lit by a late afternoon sun. The images told a story of hope, resilience, and rebuilding. Nowhere in them was the fight she'd been part of. That wasn't her story to tell. When she landed, her editor, David Thompson, was waiting in the newsroom with a grin. The Phoenix. Coverage is incredible. Best humanitarian piece we've run all year. Glad you liked it, Maya said, hanging her jacket on the back of her chair. Michael Rodriguez appeared at her desk, leaning casually against the edge. Phoenix must have been intense. How do you stay so calm in places like that? Maya looked at him for a long moment, seeing in his face a version of herself from years ago. Eager, curious, untested. Fear comes from inexperience, Michael. Courage comes from knowing you can protect the people who matter. You sound like you've done that before, he said, half smiling. She just smiled back. More than you know. That night, back in her apartment, she unpacked her bag. The camera went on the desk, the lenses in their cases, the scope. She sat on the windowsill, where the fading light caught the etched serial numbers. Her phone buzzed. A single message from Harrison Phantom. If we need you again. She typed back slowly. I'm Maya Reeves. I'm a journalist. But if people like Dr. Martinez need protection. Some ghosts never really disappear. She set the phone down, leaning back in her chair. The city lights flickering outside. The thing about ghosts is they don't live for recognition. They don't ask for applause or headlines. They work in silence, making sure someone else can stand in the light. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and somewhere in Phoenix, Dr. Lisa Martinez was still saving lives, never knowing that a legendary phantom had stood in the shadows for 3 days, keeping the danger at bay. Not everyone who carries a powerful past needs to be celebrated. Some walk quietly through our lives, leaving behind skills and wisdom for the exact moment they're needed. Maya Reeves, former phantom, current journalist, eternal guardian, understood that better than anyone.